Hi everyone, I've just brought another video for you guys, so let's get started without further ado. Also, remember to like and comment. Tell me which manhwa you'd like me to cover next. Let's do this. The man stood motionless by the window, watching the darkness of the night. His expression was serious, burdened by the weight of thoughts that seemed to haunt him in that silent environment. He turned his attention to his wife, who was sitting on the edge of the bed. The physical distance between the two in the luxurious room reflected the cold abyss that had grown in their relationship. The young woman was visibly trembling, shrinking as if trying to disappear. Fear and anxiety ran through her body, revealing how fragile she felt in the face of that oppressive presence. The husband, however, watched the scene coldly. There was no compassion in his gaze, only an irritated impatience with the vulnerability she displayed. His mind, however, wandered through memories of pleasure. He recalled moments of intimacy with other women, where fidelity was readily forgotten in favor of lust. He remembered the intoxication provided by wealth and success. On those occasions, surrounded by gold and fleeting company, he laughed without any concern for the consequences. For him, life had been a sequence of parties and indulgences. While enjoying wine and forbidden caresses, his wife's existence became just an irrelevant detail. Meanwhile, her reality had been marked by loneliness. The young woman had spent countless nights on the floor of that room, shedding tears for a love that was never returned. The pain of betrayal and abandonment was profound. She bit her lips to stifle her sobs, enduring a silent suffering that consumed her day after day. Her hand gripped the sheets tightly, seeking some support. The ring on her finger, once a symbol of unity, now seemed to weigh like a chain of broken promises. However, that night, anguish turned into resolution. Her fingers closed firmly around a piece of paper, channeling all her pain into a single act of decision. The man tried to start a conversation, but his words sounded empty. The wife remained seated, holding the document that represented the end of her silence and submission. With a smooth movement, she let the paper slip from her fingers. The sheet slid to the floor, landing like a definitive verdict that ended that cycle of suffering. The husband recoiled, surprised, realizing the sudden change in her attitude. The woman stood up and walked past him, emanating a coldness he never expected to see. Leaving that weight behind, her face lit up. A radiant and hopeful smile appeared on her lips, celebrating the freedom finally regained. The husband stared at his wife, incredulous at her sudden change in behavior. The tension was visible on his face, as he did not expect such audacity. Her words echoed in his mind, leaving him momentarily speechless. The initial shock quickly gave way to a deep disbelief about what he had just heard. Frustrated, the man put his hand to his head, trying to process the absurd situation. The wife, however, remained firm in the face of his exasperation. The irritation grew, causing him to tighten his own collar forcefully. He felt suffocated and cornered by her defiant posture. The young woman approached, invading his personal space with confidence. She was direct and demanded a considerable portion of his fortune, without showing any hesitation. The husband's indignation exploded at that demand. He shouted, refusing to accept the absurdity of the situation, and gestured furiously at her. In an aggressive impulse, he reached out to grab her. The man tried to impose his authority physically, seeking to prevent her from continuing with that challenge. However, her determination remained unwavering. With a serene and hopeful smile, the wife declared that she would finally regain control of her own life. The imposing mansion, which for so long served as the setting for the couple's life, now seemed only a silent witness to that imminent rupture. The young woman watched the world outside through the window. The sound of birds seemed to call her, contrasting with the heavy atmosphere she was leaving behind. Her gaze carried a complex mixture of feelings. There was firmness in her decision, but also a hint of melancholy as she reflected on the past. As she contemplated the vast gardens of the property, memories of simpler and brighter times began to emerge in her mind. She recalled the happy days they lived in that place. There was a time when love seemed to blossom peacefully, long before the fights and financial demands. In those memories, the husband was not the choleric man he was now. He used to look at her tenderly, showing an affection that seemed genuine and warm. And she, embracing a bouquet of flowers with a radiant smile, believed in the happiness of that marriage. It was a precious innocence that, unfortunately, had been lost over time. The young wife waited in silence, watching the morning light through the window. There was a calmness in her posture that contrasted with the recent conflicts. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Without turning completely, she authorized the entry of whoever was in the hallway. The maid entered the room with hesitant steps. It was the loyal servant who had been with her since the wedding, bringing with her an expression of deep concern. Noticing the tension of the newcomer, the protagonist offered a warm smile. She tried to convey that everything would be all right, despite the unstable situation in the house. The maid, however, remained motionless in the center of the room. The atmosphere was charged, and the silence between the two seemed heavy and full of meaning. Soon, the young servant's eyes filled with tears. The anguish she was trying to repress finally overflowed before her mistress. The wife watched the scene with genuine curiosity. She did not expect such an emotional reaction at that moment, and sought to understand the reason for the crying. Trembling, the maid extended a document towards her boss. That gesture seemed to be a formal and desperate attempt to deal with the imminent separation. The protagonist, however, reacted with lightness and good humor, which shocked the other. Her carefree attitude contrasted totally with the servant's nervousness. Unable to comprehend such calmness, the maid questioned her mistress's intentions. Her voice failed, choked by the emotion of the moment. The wife's expression turned serious and thoughtful. She realized that HR decisions would affect not only herself, but also those who were loyal to her. With a firm look, the protagonist addressed the young woman by name, Neri. It was time to face the reality of their impending departure. In a sudden impulse, Neri grabbed her mistress's hands tightly. Amidst her despair, she declared that she would leave with her, refusing to be left behind. The servant's face was bathed in tears, but her eyes showed determination. Her loyalty spoke louder than her fear of an uncertain future. Moved, the wife gently stroked the young woman's head, who burst into sobs in her lap. That gesture sealed the silent commitment that they would not be separated. Little Neri sniffled, surprised to see the sudden change in her mistress's behavior. The protagonist smiled confidently, showing that she would not be defeated by the situation. Later, the grand mansion became the stage for a crucial business meeting. The young woman sat down to receive the administrator, who respectfully awaited her instructions. The man presented the financial documents with a polished smile, believing that everything was in order. She examined the contents with a critical eye, muttering as she processed the information. Suddenly, the young woman slammed the papers on the table authoritatively, disrupting the calm of the environment. The administrator adjusted his glasses, nervously realizing that something had gone wrong. She questioned him directly, demanding to know the meaning of those inconsistencies. The man panicked, shuffling through the papers tremulously as he tried to formulate an excuse. With a sharp smile, the protagonist pointed out that the deposit amounts were unacceptable. She kept her hand firmly on the document, refusing to accept that administrative failure. As she detailed the error, cold sweat ran down the face of the cornered employee. The man jumped up, shocked by her insight and the harshness of her words. However, she immediately grabbed his arm, preventing him from escaping responsibility. The wife leaned in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, cornering the employee. The sudden proximity made the man recoil, feeling the weight of the veiled threat. Her gaze became sharp and penetrating. She watched his every reaction, making it clear that she perceived much more than he would have liked. She stipulated the new financial rules with surgical precision. The amount he could manipulate was drastically reduced, cutting off his avenues of action. The administrator, now in visible panic, wiped the sweat that ran down his forehead. He realized that there was no escape from her relentless logic. The young woman maintained a firm posture, showing no mercy. His incompetence and audacity had exhausted her patience. Leaning over the shrinking man, she declared her absolute sovereignty over her own spending. It was not up to him to question how she used her fortune. A mocking smile appeared on her face. The satisfaction of putting him in his place was evident in her expression. With condescending pats on his shoulder, she ended the discussion unilaterally, leaving the man stunned and babbling in shock. As she retreated with elegant steps, the administrator stood up shakily, unable to process the humiliation and loss of power he had just suffered. A victorious smile adorned the wife's face as she walked away. She had successfully reaffirmed her authority in the mansion, with absolute success. Later, the quiet of the night enveloped the luxurious room, bringing a peaceful contrast to the tension of the day. The protagonist relaxed on the sofa, holding a glass of wine. Under the moonlight, she could finally let her guard down and reflect. As she gently swirled the drink, her thoughts turned to the surreal nature of her existence and the memories she carried. She took a deep sip, letting the taste of the wine calm her mind as she recalled her journey to that moment. Her gaze became nostalgic as she recalled the fateful day she woke up in that body, starting her new life. The wine rested in the glass, shining in the light, offering a moment of silent pause. The luxurious room remained quiet, with sunlight beginning to fill the space through the canopy. The young woman looked up, letting her thoughts wander away from the immediate concerns of the mansion. She got out of bed, feeling the firm floor and the soft carpet beneath her bare feet. The wife seemed composed, feeling a strange mental clarity after resting. With a decisive movement, she opened the curtains, allowing the daylight to flood the room. She stood there for a moment, watching the property through the glass as the sun warmed her face. Suddenly, a wave of joy washed over her. The mere prospect of accumulating financial wealth made her smile and clench her fists in pure excitement. Her mind traveled outside the mansion, visualizing the imposing facade of the bank in the city. The establishment's lobby was bustling, filled with people tending to their interests and the sound of deals being closed. An employee presented an open briefcase on the counter, which left the maid beside her visibly impressed. The protagonist, however, just smiled confidently. This was exactly what she expected to see. The banker's hand slid into the drawer, revealing stacks of bills organized and ready for withdrawal. The young woman held the wad of bills, a triumphant smile curving her lips as she assessed the available capital. Her fingers ran through the bills with agility, feeling the concrete texture of wealth in her hands. The wife walked purposefully through the city streets, with Neri right behind carrying the valuable briefcase. Their destination seemed certain, and their pace was firm toward their goal. The young woman stopped for a moment, turning to her maid. There was a glint of expectation in her eyes that Neri, still apprehensive, tried to decipher. The satisfaction on the protagonist's face was evident. She could barely contain her joy and confidence in what she was about to accomplish with that amount. As the lady hummed carefree, Neri followed her confused, internally questioning what the purpose of so much money and that sudden good mood could be. They stopped in front of a busy commercial establishment in the city. It was a real estate agency, the exact place where the next step of the plan would be executed. The door's bell announced the entrance of the two clients, marking the beginning of a transaction that would change their destinies. A realtor greeted them with a warm and professional smile, realizing immediately, from the visitor's posture, that she was facing a great business opportunity. The wife removed her gloves with elegance, preparing to deal with serious matters. Her attitude exuded authority, ready to begin negotiations. Without wasting time, she began to discuss values and properties. The realtor seemed surprised and excited by the young woman's frankness and willingness to negotiate. The woman presented several options, handing over folders and documents for the visitor's analysis. Neri watched the interaction in silence, keeping the briefcase safe in her lap. The protagonist examined the papers with meticulous attention. She seemed to be looking for something specific, an opportunity that aligned perfectly with her desires. While the realtor detailed the qualities of the property with enthusiasm, the young woman read the information, absorbing every detail with a critical and insightful look. The agent then offered a specific portfolio with a confident smile, suggesting that this could be the ideal property for the client's needs. The image in the document revealed an imposing and vast mansion. It was a grandiose property, with extensive gardens, befitting the fortune she carried. Upon fixing her eyes on the image of the house, the wife's expression became serious and intense. There was a deep recognition in that look, as if that choice defined her future. The protagonist examined the map with meticulous attention, mentally tracing the boundaries of the property. She knew exactly the potential of that specific area. The realtor, however, hesitated at the choice. She looked at the young woman with evident surprise, internally questioning whether this was really the most prudent decision for a lady. The wife, however, saw beyond the present. She watched the movement of the street through the window, noting the pulsating life of the city and the flow of ordinary people. In her mind, she projected the future of that neighborhood. She knew that the region would prosper, attracting wealth and becoming a central point for high society and commerce. The young woman silently calculated each variable. It was not just an impulsive purchase, but a strategy based on knowledge that only she possessed. When the price was mentioned, her expression hardened. She questioned the value with a fierce intensity that frightened the employee next to her, making it clear that she would not accept being exploited. The realtor, recovering her composure, smiled professionally. Faced with such determination, she readily agreed to close the deal on the proposed terms. With the portfolio in hand, the wife reviewed the final details with the confidence of someone who already owned the property. She dominated the negotiation completely. Once again, the agent was caught off guard by the client's cunning. The older woman could barely disguise her shock at the audacity of that young woman. Satisfied with what she read, the protagonist closed the folder with a definitive gesture. The discussion was over. The decision had been made. The transaction was formalized right there. The realtor handed over the property documents, while the wife received them, aware that this investment would guarantee her future. She adjusted her hair, feeling a deep personal satisfaction. That successful deal was proof of her ability and independence. Outside, the imposing buildings under the clear sky now represented her new assets. The city seemed much more promising under her new perspective. The success of the endeavor was absolute. That simple gesture confirmed that the negotiation had exceeded all expectations. The real estate employee did not contain his admiration, vibrating with the negotiation skill he had just witnessed. The wife laughed, amused by his enthusiasm and recognition. The wife walked down the street with firm, rhythmic steps. There was a renewed confidence in her posture after the success of the recent negotiation. She paused for a moment, ignoring the movement around her. The sound of laughter echoed behind her, marking the end of that transaction. Neri, however, followed close behind, carrying the purchases, still stunned. The maid seemed unable to process the magnitude of what her mistress had just accomplished. The broker, who was watching them, laughed openly at the situation. The woman found amusement in the incredulity plastered on the servant's face at the bold purchase. The protagonist noticed her companion's hesitant behavior. She turned, noting the worried and confused expression on the young woman's face. Neri took advantage of the attention to approach quickly. The maid seemed anxious, leaning in as if she needed to confirm that all of this was really true. The young servant looked at her mistress with a mixture of shock and admiration. She could hardly believe the naturalness with which the wife handled such high values. In response, the wife held Neri's hands firmly. It was a physical and decisive gesture to bring the girl back to reality and calm her down. With a playful smile, the protagonist pulled the maid, swinging her arms. She insisted that Neri would need to get used to this new pace of life immediately. Neri widened her eyes, caught off guard by her mistress's relaxed attitude. The nervousness gave way to genuine astonishment at so much vivacity and joy. The wife watched the girl's reaction with a gentle look. She seemed determined to teach her servant how to enjoy the moment without guilt or fear. Under the sunlight, the protagonist made a bold statement to the young woman. She promised to demonstrate in practice how to spend that fortune with complete freedom and abundance. The broker couldn't contain her joy at that vibrant scene. The woman found the interaction and the promise of future spending absolutely enchanting. The two stopped to listen to the broker's final comment. The climate of financial tension had dissipated, giving way to a light and fun atmosphere. The wife smiled serenely, satisfied with the outcome of that meeting. She knew that this was just the beginning of her new plans. The wife entered the store with determination. She immediately informed the clerk of the reason for her visit. With a confident smile, she made her demands. The employee, sensing the opportunity, agreed with vibrant enthusiasm. The lady's attention, however, returned to Neri. She suggested a dress on display, asking the servant's opinion. Not satisfied with just looking, she picked up another model. The wife held it against Neri's body to test the look. Neri faced the task with extreme seriousness. The young woman seemed to analyze the options as if it were a matter of life or death. The pressure, however, was too much for her. Neri whimpered, admitting that it was impossible to choose between so many beautiful things. The innocent reaction amused the wife. With a lively gesture, she decided to solve the problem in the most extravagant way possible. She ordered them to start the measurements immediately. Neri was caught by surprise when the measuring tape surrounded her. The fitting room became a scene of light chaos. Neri found herself in the middle of a whirlwind of fabrics and frantic adjustments. Moments later, the wife emerged impeccably dressed. The new outfit enhanced her natural elegance with a touch of sparkle. Neri stood paralyzed before that vision. The servant's face flushed with pure admiration for her mistress's beauty. Under that intense gaze, the wife felt a sudden shyness. A slight blush rose to her cheeks. She twirled to display the complete outfit. The servant could barely contain her reaction to the transformation. Suddenly, the wife's smile softened into melancholy. The sudden change in mood intrigued the clerk in the background. She distractedly touched her own hand. In that moment of silence, her thoughts seemed to have traveled far away. She embraced her new identity with pride. Elisa de Harpen was not just a name, but the affirmation of who she had decided to become. Determined to resolve everything promptly, Elisa refused installments. She informed them that she would pay the full amount right there, demonstrating her financial power. The negotiation flowed quickly. While Elisa confirmed the final details, the person in charge took notes, ensuring that every requirement was met. Her hand slid across the paper with firmness and elegance. The signature finalized the agreement, marking another stage overcome in her journey of liberation. With the deal closed, the clerk thanked her profusely. Elisa smiled, satisfied, while Neri seemed barely able to believe her mistress's efficiency and generosity. They left the establishment under invitations to return. The departure from the boutique marked the end of the shopping and the practical beginning of a new phase. Later, a letter rested on the table. That document would be the key to Elisa's next strategic move. Without wasting time, she met to deal with new bureaucratic matters. The response was immediate, demonstrating that her influence was beginning to open doors. The tension gave way to pure euphoria. Neri, with tears in her eyes, held her mistress's hands, sharing the happiness of that achievement. Fate led them to an imposing property. The residence of the Duke of Payhorn stood before them, vast and intimidating. Inside the palace, the sound of footsteps echoed through the empty corridor. A woman waited patiently in the center of the grand hall. Elisa's silhouette was projected in the illuminated entrance. She advanced, ready to enter that new, unknown territory. Upon opening the door, Elisa entered the room. However, her arrival did not go unnoticed by the imposing figure watching over the place. The young woman stopped short, visibly surprised. The unexpected presence of that person made her hesitate, bringing a sudden nervousness to her face. The woman in front of her smiled with an air of superiority, closing her fan. The silent confrontation made it clear that Elisa would find challenges in that place. The red-haired woman smiled disdainfully, certain of her superiority in that unexpected encounter. However, the young woman maintained her composure, facing the provocation with an impassive and cold look. Ignoring any etiquette, the rival purposefully passed by her, invading her personal space with arrogance. She stopped right behind her, asking in a mocking tone if the protagonist still believed she held the title of Duchess. The young woman turned slowly. The sunlight illuminated her face, which showed no fear, only an unsettling calm. Pointing her fan accusingly, the woman demanded to know when the ex-duchess would pack her bags and leave there humiliated. Hearing the insults, the protagonist remained silent, only observing the lack of class of her interlocutor. The lady in red adjusted her posture presumptuously, believing she had hit her opponent's weak spot. To the aggressor's surprise, the young woman simply smiled gently, radiating a confidence that filled the room. The unexpected reaction made the woman recoil, shocked and offended, watching her expression of triumph crumble. Unable to contain herself in the face of such audacity, the protagonist covered her mouth and began to laugh openly. She laughed until tears came to her eyes, genuinely amused by the pathetic attempt at intimidation. The situation quickly reversed. The lady in red trembled with fury, her face flushing with shame and anger. While the rival shouted in frustration, the young woman stared at her with a radiant smile, completely disarming the hostility. That was the genuine smile of someone who no longer let herself be shaken by empty threats or lost titles. The red-haired woman was speechless in the face of that unexpected reaction. While she seethed with shame and shock, Elisa just found the situation amusing. Leaving the frustrated rival behind in the corridor, the protagonist walked away with her head held high. She decided she wouldn't waste another second on petty insults. Later, determined to enjoy her newfound freedom, the young woman headed to the city. A charming boutique caught her attention, promising a fresh start for her wardrobe. The atmosphere inside was light and cheerful. Neri twirled in front of the mirror, enchanted with the new dress, while her mistress watched her with a warm smile. The young maid admired her reflection, her eyes shining with pure emotion. It was a rare moment of vanity and happiness for her. Elisa watched her loyal companion's joy with genuine affection. She commented on how adorable Neri looked, pleased to provide that moment. Soon, it was Elisa's own turn to transform. She emerged wearing an elegant pink outfit that radiated light and enhanced her natural beauty. The onlookers could barely contain their admiration at that sight. They smiled openly, captivated by how stunning the young woman looked. Examining herself in the mirror, the protagonist assessed the whole ensemble from head to toe. The dress was perfect, but she felt the look wasn't complete yet. Something was missing to finalize the image she wanted to project. She touched her chin thoughtfully, trying to identify exactly what was lacking. Realizing the need for a finishing touch, she called the assistant's attention. It was time to look for the ideal accessory elsewhere. The search for the perfect detail led them to a neighboring establishment. The facade of a jewelry store promised exactly the luxury Elisa was looking for. Upon arriving at the new destination, an employee greeted them at the door with a respectful bow. Elisa walked with confidence, enjoying her status and freedom. A slight smile lit up the young woman's face as she looked around. She felt lighter and more radiant than in many years. Inside the store, a refined gentleman, wearing a monocle, offered his cordial welcome. He seemed ready to cater to the desires of such distinguished clients. The jeweler guided Elisa through the establishment, eager to display his best pieces. However, the young woman's attention soon noticed another silent customer in the background. Neri whispered, impressed with the luxury around. Elisa, however, maintained her confident posture, simply smiling at the maid's naive reaction. They walked through the upper floor, observing the display cases. The protagonist was looking for something specific, a jewel that really stood out among the others. The owner presented several trays of rings and stones. Elisa crossed her arms, examining the options with a critical and hard-to-please look. She pondered carefully about what she saw. The pieces were beautiful, but they lacked that special and unique touch that she wanted for herself. Suddenly, her eyes shone brightly. Something had finally caught her attention amidst so many precious stones. Elisa turned abruptly, ignoring the selection on the table. The jeweler was confused by the customer's sudden change of focus. An employee displayed a magnificent necklace in another direction. The piece seemed to be exactly the kind of treasure the young woman was looking for. However, before she could act, a gloved hand intercepted the object. The mysterious hooded figure reached the jewel before she did. The stranger held the sapphire necklace, examining the quality of the stone against the light. He seemed determined to keep the item. Elisa was dumbfounded by the situation. She didn't expect to have to compete for a purchase so suddenly. The surprise soon gave way to indignation. The young woman couldn't believe she would lose the perfect piece right before her eyes. The man noticed her presence and turned his face. Under the dark hood, golden and piercing eyes watched her with curiosity. Regaining her composure, Elisa clasped her hands and smiled sweetly. Gently but firmly, she claimed priority over the discovery. The stranger revealed his face, displaying an amused smile. The young woman's audacity seemed to have piqued his interest rather than irritated him. The jewel was raised, displaying its undeniable value. That was, without a doubt, the object of the dispute. Elisa reacted with astonishment. The twist in the negotiation caught her off guard. The mysterious man, however, maintained his composure. He seemed to appreciate the discomfort he caused. He claimed the necklace for himself firmly. The atmosphere between the two crackled with the clash of wills. The entire store seemed to hold its breath at the silent impasse. The manager, trying to appease tempers, confirmed the priority. The stranger had arrived first, after all. Validated by the salesman, the man provoked Elisa. He made a point of emphasizing that the rule was in his favor. Elisa and her maid were stunned. His attitude was as disconcerting as his appearance. The stranger then smiled openly, amused by their reaction. All the tension seemed to be just a joke to him. Elisa, however, felt her patience running out. That frivolous behavior irritated her deeply. She questioned the salesman one last time, accepting defeat reluctantly. The situation was too absurd to continue. With a resigned sigh, the young woman decided to back down. It wasn't worth fighting over a mere whim. She received her previous purchases, ending the interaction. The deal was done, though not as she wanted. Elisa turned her back and walked towards the exit, determined to ignore the man's presence. However, frustration still marked her face. That unforeseen encounter had left a bitter impression. The hooded man watched her leave with an amused smile, clearly intrigued by the audacity she had shown. Elisa, however, turned away, annoyed. That little setback was nothing compared to what she still had to face. Upon arriving at the mansion that night, the silence was broken by furious shouts questioning her presence in that place. Her husband glared at her with hostility, but Elisa remained seated, receiving the insults with a disconcerting coldness. He shouted uncontrollably, reinforcing that she was no longer part of that family and had no rights there. However, her reaction was a slight smile. His attempt to intimidate her now seemed pathetic in her eyes. Elisa's indifference only fueled his fury, who clenched his teeth, incredulous at that lack of fear. Ignoring the man's outburst, she calmly placed the cup on the saucer, maintaining impeccable etiquette. She drank her tea calmly, turning her silence into a weapon sharper than his screams. Exasperated at being ignored, the husband punched the table violently, making the dishes tremble with the brute impact. Elisa didn't even flinch. She just watched him with a look of superiority, finding humor in that despair. While the man trembled with rage, young Lupin watched the scene in the background, visibly tense and unsure how to act. The boy was sweating cold, feeling cornered by the heavy atmosphere and the power struggle between the two. Elisa then turned her attention away from her ex-husband and focused on the young man, addressing him with a natural authority. She made it clear that she needed his cooperation, completely ignoring the authority of the man who was shouting next to her. The husband's fury finally overflowed. Unable to contain his rage with just insults, he resorted to direct physical aggression. The impact was sudden and violent. The young woman was struck hard, the sharp sound of the blow echoing through the luxurious room. The force of the slap turned her face to the side. The shock of the moment left her momentarily stunned, feeling her skin burn where she was hit. The man continued to scream, with clenched fists and bulging veins. He tried to impose his authority through fear and loud intimidation. She remained silent, processing the assault. Her breathing was heavy, but the paralyzing fear he expected to see didn't come. In truth, the real panic was his. The husband was terrified of the idea of the financial scandal and alimony becoming public. Upon realizing the pathetic insecurity behind his violence, a cold, confident smile appeared on her lips. With her dignity intact, the wife stood up. There was no longer any reason to remain there listening to his ravings. She simply turned her back on him and began to walk away. That silent gesture definitively ended any bond that still remained between them. Meanwhile, Neri waited anxiously at the entrance to the mansion. The faithful maid was worried about her mistress's return that night. Upon seeing the wife, the young woman ran towards her, with a genuine smile of relief and welcome. However, Neri's smile instantly vanished. She stopped short, horrified to notice the red and swollen mark on her mistress's face. The wife, however, maintained her serenity. She looked at the maid tenderly, trying to show that she was fine despite what had happened. Neri's eyes immediately filled with tears. The pain and helplessness of seeing her mistress hurt were overwhelming. Ignoring her own pain, the wife wrapped the young woman in a comforting embrace, consoling the only person in that house who showed true loyalty. Elisa looked at her maid seriously. The moment to share her future plans required firmness, but also revealed the complicity between the two. Neri's reaction was immediate and emotional. Tears welled up in her eyes, mixing relief and concern at her mistress's words. The sadness soon gave way to vibrant excitement as they discussed the details of the move. The idea of renovating the interior of the new residence brought a genuine smile to the maid's face. Without wasting time, they set off into the night. The carriage moved quickly, leaving behind the oppressive past as the wheels pounded against the road. Elisa watched the moon through the carriage window. As the night landscape passed by, she reflected silently on the uncertainties that awaited her. The young woman knew that the future would bring immense challenges. She recognized internally that there would be difficult obstacles too hard to bear without help or preparation. Once settled in, the routine began to change. The soft sound of fine fabrics being handled indicated the start of lively preparations in the room. Neri, recovered from her previous anguish, displayed dresses with enthusiasm. Elisa watched the scene comfortably seated on the bed, appreciating the light energy of the environment. The young noblewoman agreed with the suggestions, showing a cheerful disposition. There was a renewed sparkle in her eye when deciding the next steps of the day. The maid didn't contain her happiness, embracing the clothes with delight. Seeing her mistress so excited transformed simple tasks into moments of pure celebration. Feeling lighter than ever, Elisa threw herself back onto the bed. She let out a deep sigh, laughing at the feeling of freedom that now filled her days. Lying down and looking at the ceiling, she contemplated this new reality. The peace of living without fear seemed almost unreal after so much suffering. Suddenly, the image of a precious object occupied her thoughts. A necklace with a large blue stone shone brightly in her mind, standing out as something crucial. The sudden memory made Elisa sit up abruptly in bed. The sudden movement startled Neri, who interrupted her chores, surprised by her mistress's abrupt change in behavior. Elisa sighed wearily. The young assistant, holding the fabric, seemed momentarily distracted by the elegance of his client. The boy hesitated, touching his own chin as he pondered something that went beyond the immediate service. His reaction caught Elisa's attention, who stared at him with an expression of slight curiosity and surprise. But there were other matters to address. The city shone under the daylight, hiding secrets in its labyrinthine streets. Needing guidance, they approached a passerby. The man pointed the direction, indicating a path that led away from the noble areas. Following the instructions, they arrived at a staircase that led to Workshop Alley. The contrast with the main street was evident in the darkness and disorder below. The atmosphere was gloomy. As they walked through the narrow alley, a black cat watched them silently from atop a barrel. Before a worn wooden door, a firm hand knocked, announcing the arrival of the visitors. What they saw inside left them stunned. The place was in complete disarray, raising doubts as to whether a true craftsman could live there. Elisa put her hand to her chest, visibly uncomfortable and shocked by the dirt and chaos that reigned in the room. Inside, a man stood with his back turned, hunched over a table full of papers, oblivious to their presence. He didn't move. His rigid posture suggested he was deeply focused or deliberately ignoring the outside world. Outside, the building's facade looked as neglected as the interior, clashing with the elegance of the two women. Receiving no immediate response, they decided to persist. Elisa and Neri waited anxiously before the aged wood. Suddenly, the door opened. A gloved hand emerged from the shadows, surprising Elisa before she could step back. The workshop owner turned, interrupting his work. His rigid posture and stern expression made it clear that he didn't usually welcome unexpected visitors. He narrowed his eyes behind his lenses, examining the newcomer with suspicion. The man seemed to be silently judging whether she was worth his time, or just another nuisance. Elisa felt the impact of that probing gaze. The veiled hostility in the atmosphere made her hesitate for a moment, caught off guard by the cold and intimidating reception. The craftsman adjusted his glasses, maintaining a deliberate silence. He exuded an aura of impatience, as if he expected the intruders to give up and leave on their own. The place was a reflection of its occupant. The clock on the wall and the scattered tools indicated an environment where time passed slowly, and work was the only priority. Dusty shelves supported jars and old books in the corners of the room. Sunlight timidly entered, illuminating the dust dancing in the workshop's stagnant air. The workbench was chaotic, filled with crumpled papers and melted candles. It was the sanctuary of someone who dedicated their entire life to the craft, with no room for order or social calls. However, Elisa didn't back down. She sat down before him, placing her documents on the table, determined to turn that tense encounter into a productive negotiation. The man kept a closed expression as he listened to the proposal. He wasn't the type to be easily impressed by nobles or pretty words. The young woman noticed his continued resistance. The prolonged silence and the craftsman's fixed gaze increased the tension, making her question whether her approach was correct. Determined not to fail, Elisa regained her confidence and smiled openly. She changed her tone of voice, trying to be more persuasive in order to finally break down the man's defensive barrier. The argument finally touched on something relevant. The craftsman lowered his eyes, muttering a reluctant agreement, admitting that her vision did, in fact, have some logical basis. With the ice broken, the conversation moved on to practical terms. He began to explain the conditions and technical details, while Elisa and her companion paid attention to every word. The man scratched his chin, thoughtful and calculating. He was still assessing the implications of the request, seriously pondering whether it was worth getting involved in that specific project. Elisa gently touched the brooch on her collar, feeling victorious. The discreet smile on her lips indicated that she knew she had managed to spark the craftsman's genuine interest. Elisa maintained a cordial smile, aware that kindness would be her best strategy in that rustic environment. The monotonous sound of the clock on the wall filled the silence, marking the slow passage of time during the evaluation. The presented document contained precise instructions. It wasn't a common request, but something that required refined technique. The craftsman adjusted his glasses, examining every detail of the paper with skepticism evident in his gaze. The young woman promptly clarified her priorities. She didn't demand speed, but rather that the work be executed with extreme delicacy. Faced with those conditions, the man began to sketch in his notebook, while Elisa and Neri waited with anticipation, satisfied with the progress of the conversation. Elisa prepared to offer payment, pulling out her purse with confidence. However, a heavy, calloused hand slammed onto the table, abruptly interrupting her gesture. The craftsman stared at her seriously, making it clear that the financial matter would not be resolved so easily. Elisa recoiled, startled by the abrupt reaction. The sudden mention of the local currency caught her completely off guard. She hesitated, trying to understand the reason for that interruption. The logic of the negotiation had suddenly changed. The man interlaced his fingers on the table, adopting a serious posture before explaining his objection. He seemed tired and frustrated, as if that specific discussion was giving him an unwanted headache. Upon standing up, he was categorical about the limit of the value, refusing to accept any amount above 200,000. The imposition of that financial ceiling shocked Elisa. The restriction was an obstacle that she had not factored into her plans. The world of jewelry had always been built on the hard work and technical precision of countless anonymous artisans. It was a business driven by the greed of influential merchants and the vanity of high society, where profit dictated the rules of the game. However, Elisa was determined to break with this cycle. With a firm gesture on the table, she demonstrated that her will was unwavering. The craftsman, caught off guard by the young noble's determination, interrupted his thoughts, stunned by that unexpected stance. She wasn't just there for a common business transaction. She extended her hand, offering something much greater than a simple payment. With the confidence of a leader, the protagonist declared that this man would, from now on, be her right-hand man in the creation of all her future pieces. The audacious proposal made the man's eyes widen, suddenly realizing the magnitude of the opportunity and the challenge presented to him. Still processing the shock, he accepted the gesture. There, in the middle of the workshop, a crucial agreement was sealed between the visionary and the creator. The handshake sealed the commitment, uniting two distinct worlds in a common goal that promised to transform the market. Elisa smiled gently, pleased to have won the loyalty of someone whose talent would be indispensable to her plans. The craftsman, in turn, remained silent, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had just assumed alongside that extraordinary woman. Later, back at the imposing mansion, the tranquility of the exterior contrasted with the young woman's restless mind. In the isolation of her office, Elisa sat down to organize the next steps, aware that the agreement in the workshop was only the beginning. She pondered deeply on the complexities of the business she was entering, calculating each variable with strategic coldness. After all, the true origin of those riches was not in the ballrooms, but in the raw and distant reality of the extraction mines. The craftsman meticulously dedicated himself to polishing the piece, ignoring any external distraction. His focus on manual work was absolute, Meanwhile, the tension exploded at the entrance. The administrator tried to resolve the impasse with money, throwing bills on the floor in an act of desperation and arrogance. The young worker, however, refused to accept the humiliation. With a firm gesture, he rejected the offer, preventing any dishonest negotiation. Elisa watched the scene in silence, analyzing the integrity of those men. Their reaction confirmed her suspicions. She then indicated a specific point on the table with a gentle touch. It was time to intervene and change the course of the conversation. The young woman listened to the answer carefully, processing the information. The situation required her to clearly understand the imposed conditions. With the conversation over, Elisa got up from her chair. There was nothing more to discuss at that moment. Her steps echoed through the room with a steady cadence. She walked with the certainty of someone who has made an irrevocable decision. In a quick movement, she picked up her bag. The negotiation had been brief, but the result seemed definitive. Elisa hurried down the stairs, leaving the place with renewed energy. The impetus of her actions propelled her outside. In the hallway, the maid was completely taken by surprise. She stopped short, almost dropping the tea tray she was carrying. The young servant widened her eyes, astonished. She did not expect to find her mistress running through the halls like that. Elisa passed her with a radiant smile, without slowing down. The maid's confusion was not enough to stop her advance. The maid remained behind, trembling and confused, trying to process her boss's sudden and cheerful departure. Outside, the streets of the artisans' district remained quiet in the daylight. The silence of the city contrasted with the agitation of Elisa's plans. Elisa arrived at her destination in a simpler part of town. Determined to start her new venture, she knocked on the workshop door. The owner answered the call. The young woman greeted him with a radiant smile and cordiality, addressing him by name to establish an immediate connection. Mr. Penson, however, was visibly stunned. The presence of a noble lady at his door was something he clearly did not expect. Elisa ignored the man's astonishment and maintained her cheerful demeanor. She was there with a clear objective and needed to be persuasive from the first moment. As the young woman explained her intentions, the craftsman seemed confused. The proposal she brought sounded too strange or unexpected for him to process immediately. A week had passed since that initial first contact. Time was needed to organize the next step of the plan. Now, the scene was different. Elisa had called a formal meeting, gathering all the workers and workshop staff around a large table. With Mr. Penson's support secured, the young woman took command of the situation. She introduced herself as the new leadership figure in that environment. Elisa began to speak to the group. Beside her, the master craftsman watched the reaction of his subordinates with a serious expression. The reception, however, was cold. The workers stared at the noblewoman with distrust and tension, visibly uncomfortable with the sudden change. Realizing the heavy atmosphere, Elisa intensified her charisma. She gestured and spoke with passion, trying to sell her vision of the future to that skeptical team. The speech generated unease. The men began to whisper among themselves, exchanging doubtful glances about the feasibility of what they were hearing. Disbelief was palpable among the elders. They questioned the truthfulness of the promises, although curiosity kept them attentive to hear the rest of the proposal. Suddenly, one of the younger workers decided to intervene. He raised his hand, interrupting the moment to express a direct concern. Elisa did not back down from the challenge. With an inviting gesture and a confident smile, she gave space for the boy to speak, ready to answer any objection. The workers were stunned by the proposal. The generosity and respect shown by the noblewoman visibly moved them. Elisa maintained her confident and gentle demeanor. Beside her, the master craftsman seemed to silently approve of how the situation was unfolding. The tension in the air completely dissipated. It was the beginning of a partnership that promised to flourish. With a radiant smile, the young woman formalized her invitation. She hoped everyone there would agree to sign the new contract. Meanwhile, far away, the daylight illuminated a luxurious and imposing office. A young assistant laughed in a relaxed manner. His light-hearted mood contrasted with the usual formality of that environment. He turned to the main desk, where his lord was working. The boy seemed to be trying to get the busy man's attention. The nobleman, however, ignored the distraction. His pen glided across the paper without pause, signing bureaucratic documents. The Duke maintained absolute focus on his tasks. His expression was serious, showing no interest in trivial conversations. The assistant continued to watch him with a slight smile. He seemed to know something that his master was still unaware of. The dark-haired man flipped through the paperwork with some boredom. For him, this was just another monotonous routine. Suddenly, a gray envelope was placed before him. That specific item stood out among the common reports. The assistant widened his eyes in surprise. His reaction indicated that this correspondence was not something expected. The Duke himself lost his usual composure. Something in that letter sparked his immediate and intense attention. Without hesitation, he picked up the letter opener. Curiosity overcame indifference as he hastily broke the seal. In the Duchy's office, Elisa's husband carefully analyzed a newly arrived report. His wife's activities did not go unnoticed by his information network. Something in the document captured his immediate interest. The information contained therein revealed bold steps that he did not expect from her. The assistant confirmed the details of the investigation. Elisa was, in fact, actively seeking a gem supplier to start her own business. The revelation caused astonishment in the employee. The initiative and independence demonstrated by the young noblewoman completely departed from the standards they were accustomed to. The Duke held the paper firmly. That confirmation changed the scenario and brought a new perspective on his wife's capabilities. An amused smile curved the man's lips. Her determination to proceed with that audacious plan seemed to genuinely entertain him. Meanwhile, under the light of a sunny day, the atmosphere at Elisa's current residence was vibrant and full of hope. The young woman displayed a radiant joy as she held a new piece of mail. The good news she had been eagerly awaiting had finally arrived. Neri, caught by surprise while having a snack, widened her eyes upon seeing her lady's euphoric and sudden reaction. The maid hurried to wipe her face to pay attention. Elisa's sudden change of mood indicated that something important had happened. With an affectionate and caring gesture, Elisa touched Neri's face. She needed to share that victory with her loyal ally. The maid was disconcerted by the proximity, waving her arms comically and nervously as Elisa laughed at the light situation. Regaining her composure, Elisa showed the contents of the letter to her friend. The sender requested a direct personal meeting. Understanding and enthusiasm lit up Neri's face. That invitation was concrete proof that Elisa's efforts were paying off. The two began discussing the preparations immediately. The meeting would take place in 3 days, and they needed to plan where and how it would occur. Elisa held the letter with a victorious smile. The request she had made had finally been granted, marking the beginning of a new stage in her plans. Without wasting time, the young woman turned her attention to Neri. There were precise instructions to be followed before they could leave. The room soon became a scene of organized chaos. Elisa rummaged through racks and dresses, seeking the perfect presentation for what was to come. Neri watched the movement in astonishment. The maid could barely keep up with her lady's sudden explosion of energy and determination. Shortly after, they arrived at their destination. The imposing building indicated that this was a high-end shopping location in the city. Upon entering the establishment, Elisa was greeted with formality. With the upright posture of someone who knows what they want, she immediately announced her interest in the watches. The display cases sparkled with luxury pieces, meticulously arranged to attract the eyes of the most discerning customers. Elisa leaned over the glass, examining the options with a critical eye. She wasn't there for a casual stroll, but for a specific search. With a decisive gesture, she pointed to a specific item, requesting that the attendant remove it from the protection of the display case. The store boasted magnificent necklaces that used to be the main attraction for ladies of the nobility. Likewise, rings studded with precious stones vied for the buyer's attention, but Elisa seemed immune to the appeal of traditional jewelry. The saleswoman, maintaining her professionalism, fulfilled the customer's unusual request, guiding her away from the most popular jewels. The object of interest was a pocket watch with a classic design, a piece that, ironically, was one of the store's slowest-selling products. When the box was opened, however, Elisa's expression changed. She held the watch, admiring the details of that piece neglected by others. A thoughtful sound escaped her lips. She was assessing whether that peculiar item would serve her purposes. Elisa watched the movement in the store. As soon as one customer left, the attendant's attention immediately turned to the newcomer. The establishment was lively, with other society ladies discussing the novelties and merchandise displayed in the surrounding windows. Something in the conversation or the offer caught the young woman's attention, causing her to interrupt her thoughts and turned to the source of the sound. With a radiant and decisive smile, she pointed to the item she wanted to see, demonstrating total control over her choices and desires. The purchase was completed quickly. Elisa held the elegant bag firmly, satisfied to have acquired exactly what she needed. Back in the square, she walked elegantly among the passers-by, standing out in the crowd as she followed her route through the city. Her search continued in another jewelry store, where she listened attentively to the saleswoman's explanations about rubies and other precious gems. Upon leaving the establishment, the young woman paused on the steps and consulted her notes, checking the progress of her plans for the day. With pen in hand, she marked another completed task in her notebook, feeling increasingly productive and organized. Elisa continued on her way with the notebook close to her chest, confident that each planned step was leading her closer to her financial goals. The sunny day illuminated the facade of the grand mansion, which stood imposing and peaceful under the blue sky. Inside the residence, the office door opened gently. The maid entered carrying a tray with tea and cookies for her mistress. She found Elisa sitting at the desk, working diligently amidst piles of books and documents, taking advantage of the afternoon light. The servant approached with curiosity, noting the young woman's absolute focus, and inquired about the content of what was being written. Elisa filled the sheet with elegant and firm handwriting. The letter she was writing demanded all her attention and care in the details. The maid watched the scene with eyes shining with enthusiasm, visibly delighted with what she was witnessing. Elisa returned the positive energy with a serene smile, demonstrating calmness in the face of the situation. Night fell over the imposing property, bringing a solemn silence under the moonlight that bathed the mansion. In the comfort of her chambers, the young woman tried to read, but her attention was diverted by someone arriving behind her. Suddenly, a small box was waved before her eyes, interrupting her reading with a sudden surprise. The blonde nobleman appeared with a mischievous smile, clearly pleased with himself for having caught her off guard. Elisa held the gift with genuine curiosity, while the young man awaited her reaction with anticipation. As he settled comfortably into the chair in front of her, she pulled the red ribbon, eager to reveal the contents. The box opened to reveal a jewel of questionable opulence, a huge gold pendant with a bright blue stone. Upon lifting the necklace, Elisa froze. The exaggerated size and extravagant design left her completely stunned. The young man, however, watched with pride, convinced that he had chosen the most impressive gift possible. He began to speak animatedly, gesturing and laughing, totally oblivious to the young woman's silent shock. Elisa's expression became blank. She stared into nothingness, unsure how to react to that display of dubious taste. The young woman sighed, feeling exhausted, while the visitor continued to radiate self-confidence and his own brilliance beside her. With a seductive smile and a penetrating gaze, he awaited her thanks, certain that he had won her heart with the gesture. The night fell silently over the imposing ducal residence, enveloping the palace in tranquility. Inside, however, Elisa maintained an expression of pure embarrassment and disbelief. Her brother rambled on in a narcissistic and dramatic way, leaving the young woman completely awkward with the exaggerated performance. Holding the box firmly, she tried to question him, confused by that sudden and theatrical attitude. He, however, cut her off quickly, refusing to hear any objection or doubt at that moment. Elisa's attention returned to the present. She touched the enormous blue jewel, still unsure how to react to it. The boy remained in his confident pose, awaiting praise, while she just held the extravagant object in silence. Suddenly, his gaze drifted off, and he touched his own face, as if accessing a distant memory. Elisa remained still and serious, observing the sudden change in his thoughtful expression. In her brother's mind, an image of her walking appeared, seen from behind in a previous moment. He vividly recalled how annoyed she looked that day, huffing in frustration through the streets. Smiling at the fond memory, he blurted out that she resembled a squirrel when she was angry. As soon as the words came out, he froze. His face flushed violently as he realized he had said that out loud. Trying to regain his dignity, he cleared his throat loudly and sought to change the subject, returning to his rigid posture. Elisa, noticing his slip-up and embarrassment, let out an amused reaction, suddenly interested in her brother's vulnerability. The nobleman in military uniform attentively watched the woman sitting at the table. The silence in the luxurious room was palpable, broken only by the subtle movement of restless hands. She presented a newspaper opened on the table. The headline highlighted the inauguration of a new factory in the South, information that seemed highly relevant to the discussion. The golden-haired man read the article seriously. His eyes scanned the lines of text, analyzing the implications of that economic news. However, the newspaper was soon left aside on the armchair. That piece of information was exactly what he needed to know at that moment. A satisfied and calculating smile appeared on his face. The nobleman seemed to have found an advantageous opportunity, or confirmed a suspicion through that reading. Meanwhile, outside the imposing residence, a carriage stopped in front of the gardens. The sound of hooves ceased, announcing the arrival of an expected visitor. A young attendant waited at the entrance of the mansion. With a cordial smile and his hand over his chest, he prepared to greet whoever was in the vehicle. The carriage door opened and an elegant shoe touched the ground. The passenger descended firmly, demonstrating decisiveness in every movement. It was a young woman with pink hair, dressed in refined travel clothes. Her expression was serious and focused, exuding the confidence of someone who has a clear goal. The attendant guided her up the stone steps. She followed him readily, holding her own briefcase with determination, not intimidated by the grandeur of the place. Together, they walked towards the main gates of the palace. The visitor kept a firm pace, advancing towards her destination without hesitation. Already inside the building, her footsteps echoed through the illuminated corridor. The guide led her through the elegant architecture, taking her to the private quarters. They stopped in front of a large double door. The attendant indicated that they had arrived at the desired location, preparing to announce her presence. The door opened, revealing a spacious and well-decorated office. In the center of the room, a man noticed the movement at the entrance and turned his attention to the visitor. Upon recognizing the newcomer, the gentleman smiled gently. His posture was welcoming and his eyes sparkled, showing satisfaction in receiving her. The young woman acknowledged the courtesy upon being received. Despite the tension inherent in the meeting, she maintained etiquette and a friendly smile before the host. However, a sudden realization made her hesitate for a brief moment. The importance of that meeting seemed to have suddenly become more real. They settled on opposite sofas to begin the meeting. The formalities of introduction were exchanged, setting the tone for the negotiation to follow. Without wasting time, the protagonist slid the document across the table towards him. That dossier contained the essence of her proposal. The golden-eyed man picked up the papers with interest. A subtle smile appeared on his lips as he began to examine the presented content. Taking advantage of his attention, she began to explain her arguments with enthusiasm. The young woman gestured, trying to convey the vision and importance of what was written. The document was extensive and detailed. Each paragraph had been meticulously prepared to leave no doubt about the seriousness of her intentions. As she spoke, she visualized the success of the venture, imagining corporate presentations and positive results. This inner confidence shone through in her optimistic expression. The gentleman listened attentively, bringing his hand to his chin as a sign of reflection. The proposal clearly required careful analysis before any hasty decision. With an encouraging smile, the young woman insisted that he verify the details for himself. She was sure that the data contained therein would be convincing. Her direct and confident attitude seemed to surprise him. He watched her with a new curiosity, assessing the determination behind that request. He then turned his full attention to the pages in his hands. The sound of paper being handled filled the silence of the room, indicating that he would take the reading seriously. The man immersed himself in the reading, flipping through the document with a critical eye. He seemed to be looking for flaws or hidden opportunities in the lines of the text. The prolonged silence began to weigh on the young woman. She swallowed hard, feeling the nervousness grow as she anxiously awaited his verdict. She remained still on the sofa, watching his every reaction. The fate of her plans depended entirely on that assessment, making the wait almost unbearable. The Duke seemed lost in his own thoughts, silently pondering the situation with a serious and distant air. Christie, in turn, watched his reaction with evident apprehension, murmuring his title with uncertainty and worry etched on her face. The conversation, however, unfolded in the tea room. The red-haired woman addressed Christie familiarly, mentioning the long past they shared. With calculated calm, the visitor sipped her tea, savoring the moment of control and the tension that hung in the air. Memories surfaced, mixing Christie's former innocence and joy with the constant, and sometimes dark presence of the other woman in her past life. The red-haired woman's gaze hardened as she mentioned the time she spent in a lower position, marked by the stigma of being a concubine. She recalled her painful origin, marked by the judgment of others for being an illegitimate daughter, and the cruel fate of being treated as a commodity to be sold. As a child, she faced utter despair and tears over a dark future that was imposed on her without her having a choice. However, she learned to adapt, wearing silks and assuming the rigid posture demanded by high society to survive in that environment. All of that served a dark purpose: to suppress her own misery and transform inner pain into a cold and calculating force. She completely rebuilt herself, rising with a fierce determination that now emanated from her like a palpable and intimidating aura. Every detail of her new persona, down to the adornments she wore, was carefully forged to ensure she was never seen as vulnerable again. She learned to master the social game, charming nobles and winning favors with rehearsed smiles and an irresistible charm. Her reflection revealed the true ambition that had driven her from the start: to ascend socially and take the prestigious place as the Duke's wife. Back in the present, she smiled at Christie with veiled superiority, while the other tried to maintain her composure in the face of that overwhelming presence. The woman agreed, but her heart pounded violently in her chest. Beneath the controlled appearance, she felt anxiety pulsing, struggling to maintain composure in the face of that decisive moment.